Okay, I think it's been long enough that I finally mentally recovered from my last One D&D Druid video, so let's do this again. I'm not going to bury the lead on this one. I don't think that the UA Playtest 6 version of the Druid is very good. I don't think it's necessarily bad either per se, but a few features seem pretty half-baked to me. The new subclass Circle the Sea feels underwhelming at best, and I'm disappointed with the removal of wild-shaped templates, but we'll certainly get to all of that. I think it's pretty safe to say that the Unearthed Arcana Playtest 4 that featured the Druid contains some of the most controversial changes that the designers have made with One D&D so far. Maybe closely followed by the Warlock, but the Druid and specifically Wildshape, man, did that ruffle some feathers. But hey, now we have a new version of it, so let's talk about it. I want to give a huge shout out to everyone who has subscribed recently to really help my channel grow. I'm absolutely astounded by all the support. Thank you all so much. If you like what I do and would like to help me reach my goal of 3,000 subscribers by the end of August, a sub to the channel would be beyond appreciated. Thank you so much. Starting off with the first level feature, Druidic, I'm actually surprised to see that a change has been made here. It's still basically the same, except that you now also have Speak with Animals always prepared. I guess that's fine. It would have been nice to get the option to maybe cast it once per long rest for free, but it's a buff to a largely uninteresting feature, so I'm not upset about it. Next, also at first level, we have Primal Order, similar to the Cleric's Holy Order. It also seems like the designers might have taken some inspiration from the Ranger's Hunter subclass here, as there are a few features that offer choices as the Druid progresses through levels. You can tell that they were inspired by the Ranger because there is just one clear bad choice. Primal Order gives you the choice between Magician and Warden. Magician gives you one additional cantrip from the Primal spell list and a +1 to nature checks. Warden, however, offers you martial weapon proficiency and medium armor training. Like, sure, there may be some niche builds where you want to pick Magician, but generally speaking, Warden is going to be so much better 99 times out of 100. This doesn't really feel like much of a choice and maybe even more of a trap than anything else. Don't get me wrong, I do love that the choice exists, and I appreciate that they are offering a variant that leads a bit more heavily towards spellcasting, but I just wish it was actually as competitive as Warden. Second level brings Wild Companion. I'm a bit disappointed to see that the Channel Nature feature has been removed from the Druid in this playtest without really receiving any iteration. That's a complaint that I'll discuss further in a little bit though. Wild Companion is essentially the same as the Wild Companion option from the Channel Nature feature, except that now you can expend either a spell slot or a use of Wild Shape to cast Find Familiar without material components. This is something that the designers are leaning heavily into with the Druid, as well as with some other classes. They're trying to enable something of a fluidity of magic, so you can kind of decide which ability will work better in the moment that you actually need it. I do really like this design approach, I'm not gonna lie. Alright, so now we get to the big one, Wild Shape. So I feel like this isn't actually quite as hot of a take as it was when Playtest 4 initially came out, but I actually really like the templated approach to Wild Shape, and man did I get a lot of hate for that. Now, don't get me wrong, the version they presented had a lot of glaring flaws and left quite a bit to be desired, but I really appreciated where they were heading with the templates from a design approach, and I'm disappointed to see that it has simply been removed without even receiving a single iteration. This is what is actually most upsetting to me. Not that we lost the templates themselves. If the templated approach was not good for the game, or if it was causing problems, or if players were consistently hating it, then I would have been perfectly fine to see it go. What's frustrating to me is that we received no adjustments to this idea whatsoever, which is kind of annoying because despite being implemented poorly, I truly don't believe that it was actually that far off being quite good and a marked improvement over what we had in 5e. This kind of seems to be like the trend for the Druid. Channel Nature disappeared without a single attempt at a revision, and it's the same with the templated approach to Wild Shape. I just don't get it. This is a playtest. The point is to experiment and iterate. Alright. I'm not going to labor the point. If you want to see my thoughts on the UA4 Wild Shape, I'll leave a link in the description to my videos on it. So now let's talk about the new Wild Shape. Most notably, monster stat blocks are back. Yay! The ability to transform is now a bonus action rather than an action for all druids, not just Circle of the Moon druids. This is awesome. At second level, you now get to decide upon 3 known forms, which are the beasts that you can transform into using your Wild Shape, and you can replace one of them per day. The amount of known forms increases to 4 at 4th level and 5 at 8th level. If you don't want to choose, they suggest that you pick up the riding horse, the wolf, and the spider. I like that they provided suggestions here. This is great for newer players and will likely save a lot of time. I would like to see some different suggestions for different types of playstyles though, so to try and be even more friendly to new players. A few nice touches as well compared to the previous version that we had are that you can now have a swim speed immediately upon receiving the feature, and the ability to become tiny that was gated behind the absurdly delayed tiny critter feature in UA4 is now also available right away. Now, when wild shaped, you retain all of your mental stats, so you maintain your intelligence, your wisdom, charisma, and you can still speak while transformed. This is an amazing quality of life improvement. You also keep your hit dice, your class features, your species traits, and your feats. When it comes to saving throws, you get to use whichever is higher between yours or the creature's. Furthermore, you also keep the hit points that you had when you transformed, and you do not adopt those of the creature. This is sure to upset some people, but I think I actually kind of like it. While it is admittedly effectively useless for combat, it does make transforming for utility purposes much more sustainable, as you can now keep your form up for much longer than you ever realistically would have previously, particularly at lower levels. When I take a step back and I look at the new version of Wild Shape, it's not that I hate it. I actually think it's okay, probably even pretty good. I think it's better in a lot of ways than the 5e version was, but it still just doesn't solve many of the fundamental problems that the feature had that the templated approach was just better suited to solving. Firstly, you're still looking at stat blocks. Yes, I know this isn't the end of the world, and now that at least it's restricted to a few known forms, the amount of times that a player will have to do this has been dramatically reduced. But the fact still remains that poring over stat blocks, particularly when you're a new player, just kinda sucks. Some people might enjoy it, and I do not begrudge that in any way, but it just feels like unnecessary. If you're a veteran Druid player, you've probably already got your list of go-to creatures, so the whole process is just irrelevant for them, but if you're new, it can be potentially quite a high hurdle to jump. I think any feature that disproportionately disadvantages new players is just poorly designed, which is why I am grateful that they introduced these suggestions this time around, but like I said, I hope they add a few more groupings for different situations, and that they continue to offer the stat blocks in the player's handbook like they have in the past. Secondly, scaling still just sucks. That +4 to attack wolf that you got at 2nd level is the same throughout your entire campaign. It doesn't get any better since you're relegated to using a static stat block. Even as you level up, many of the options just don't provide meaningful improvements to the potency of most of the creatures. And if you're playing at the table where dinosaurs aren't included, many of your Circle of the Moon options are kinda off the table too. Little side note about that, they did remove the strange requirement that your character had to have seen the creatures before, but this now creates this odd situation where literally every beast is potentially in play, and this puts much more of an onus on the Dungeon Master to be aware if there's something that they want to restrict at their table. As I mentioned in my previous Wild Shape video, it also restricts design space, as now every creature that Wizards of the Coast wants to add the beast tag to that falls within the relevant CR range will need to be checked to ensure that it doesn't create any unintended interactions with Wild Shape. It just feels like a bit of a mess to me. The bottom line on Wild Shape is that yes, what we have now is an improvement over what we had in 5th edition, but I'm really disappointed that we didn't even get to see at least one iteration of the templated approach, so we could have really seen what it had to offer. Okay, let's move on. Wild Resurgence has returned, except now it arrives at 5th level instead of 15th, and looks absolutely nothing like the previous version. Now the feature works almost identically to the Bard's new font of inspiration. If you have no uses of Wild Shape remaining, you can gain 1 by expending a spell slot as a free action, but you can only do this once per turn. Alternatively, you can expend 1 use of your Wild Shape to grant yourself a 1st level spell slot, but you can only do that once per long rest. I have to imagine that this restriction only exists to maintain the economy of spell slot availability, particularly at lower levels where gaining an additional 2 1st level spell slots, for example, can be extremely powerful. Though I'm not actually sure that that would bother me though, I think it might actually be kinda cool. At 7th level we get a new feature, Elemental Fury, which provides a choice, Potent Spellcasting or Primal Strike. Potent Spellcasting allows you to add your Wisdom modifier to any damage dealt with a cantrip, and Primal Strike gives you an additional 1d8 cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage when you hit with a weapon or when you attack while in Wild Shape. Neither of these individually feel quite good enough to be a 7th level feature on their own, but getting both feels like it might be a little bit too much. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure, but I do feel like some adjustments need to happen here. At 15th level, you get Improved Elemental Fury. This time, you don't get to choose which one you get, you just have to take the same option that you picked at 7th level. Something I feel like I need to point out is that the 15th level version of Potent Spellcasting just feels like terrible design. Being able to cast a cantrip like Poison Spray or Frostbite or Thorn Whip from over 300 feet away means that you can essentially kill anything before it ever even gets close to you, especially since you can continue to back away from the creature as it approaches. I get that you're 15th level, so you should be strong, but this just feels half-baked. It feels especially half-baked when you compare it to Primal Strike, which is just an additional 1d8 on top of what you had before. So to summarize, you have one feature that gives you 2d8 damage while you're in melee range, and the other provides potentially infinite damage from hundreds of feet away. Seems totally reasonable. 9th level brings the Commune with Nature feature, or should I say, spell. If you've seen my channel before, you know that I really hate this trend towards just making spells into features and giving no bonus along to go with it, and for some reason 9th level just seems to be the dumping ground for these, which is extra disappointing since that's the territory when so many campaigns are winding down, so the last class feature you get tends to just be a spell prep. Not even with a single free cast per long rest. It's just so underwhelming. I've discussed my frustration with these types of features plenty in other videos, so I'm not going to spend any more time on it here. I'll leave some links below if you want to check it out. Beast Spells has returned and is still at 18th level, but has a very noteworthy change from the 5e version of the feature. In 5th edition, Beast Spells allowed you to cast any of your Druid spells while you were in wild shape form, except for those that required you to provide a material component. Now, you can cast your Druid spells while you're in wild shape, except for any spell that has a material component with a cost specified or that consumes its material component. Quite a mouthful. So, for example, you could cast something like Barkskin since the material component, a handful of oak bark, is not consumed and it has no cost associated. But you couldn't cast something like Revivify since its material component, 300 gold worth of diamonds, is consumed. This change doesn't really bother me too much either way. I feel like it made a little bit more logical sense in 5th edition, but I also feel like they kind of boxed themselves into a corner with this one since they were so explicit about allowing you to essentially kind of do anything while you're in wild shape now. The distinction of not being able to provide material components but not those with costs associated or that are consumed feels very deliberate and yet simultaneously arbitrary though. I get that that's how it worked in the old Archdruid feature, but I feel like it had to be done to avoid some specific interaction that would have made the combination too strong. I haven't actually looked into it all that deeply though, it's kind of just the impression that I get. Speaking of Archdruid though, it's back and it's back at 20th level and is pretty unimpressive. You get 3 sort of mini features. First up, Evergreen Wild Shape, which lets you regain one of your wild shapes when you roll initiative and have no uses left. I also made a whole video about these. Just let us regain a use or two without needing to have 0 left. We're at 20th level. Anyway, Nature Magician is also like an improved version of the 5th level Wild Resurgence. You can now convert wild shape uses into spell slots, with each use contributing 2 spell levels. So I guess you can't generate odd numbered spell slots, which feels very odd. Anyway, you can only do this once per long rest. Lastly, you get Longevity, which is just the old 18th level feature, Tireless Body. I'm happy that this isn't a feature on its own anymore and that it's incorporated into another one, but no one really cared about this anyway, so sticking it at 20th level just to pad out the feature feels unimpressive. To be clear, I don't think that Archdruid is bad, it just isn't really fulfilling what I think most people are looking for out of a class capstone. It doesn't feel dramatic, it doesn't make you feel like 20 levels of play was worth it for this moment, it just kind of feels like any other feature. The bottom line is that I just feel like the UA6 Druid is struggling to know what it wants to be. In many ways, it feels like clerics or bards can make for better druids than druids, and that just feels wrong. This seems to be the common trend that we're seeing in 1D&D, despite all of the alleged attention being paid to class identity and really feeling like we belong to the class that we're playing. I feel like many classes actually have a very floundering sense of identity, and it's just not coming through in the design so far. In regard to Wild Shape, like I said, it's not bad and it's definitely a step in the right direction. I'm just most disappointed by the fact that the template idea was abandoned so quickly. I know there was a ton of backlash and hate at the outset, but I think as time went on, many people did grow to appreciate what it had to offer. They had just implemented it so badly that it was hard to see what the goal actually was. But there's still time. D&D 24 isn't coming out tomorrow or next month or even this year. I am encouraged by the size of the recent Unearthed Arcana documents that we're getting these days. The team is clearly trying to get out as much content as possible, so hopefully that will make for a better end result. I just hope that all of this was worth it. If you enjoyed this video and would like to help me hit my goal of 3,000 subs by the end of August, hit that subscribe button and feel free to check out some of my other 1D&D videos. Otherwise, take care.